Hello. Welcome, everybody, to the 25th anniversary of Prop 215, the Compassionate Use Act of California, which set off a momentous revolution that has brought legal marijuana to millions of patients here, not only in California and the United States, but around the world, and set off a revolution in drug policy that is still reverberating. Almost every state of our union now recognizes medical cannabis. Over 36 foreign countries do. Unfortunately, our federal government doesn't. And unfortunately, being on federal property here, that's why we cannot have cannabis here amongst us today. So that's important to realize. There is, however, a smoking area outside on the lawn, and it's a beautiful day to go out on the lawn. And I suggest for those of you who are eating lunch here, check the lawn out to eat at. There are box lunches available. People who ordered box lunches should have a little ticket, like a movie ticket thing, in their badge holder. If you don't, and you think that you're entitled to yes, like that. You can check out at the registration desk. There is also an after party with a separate, larger invitation inside. And again, if you want to register for the party and haven't done so, you can do so again at the registration desk. There's a silent auction going on. We have some original items, very 25-year vintage items from the Prop 215 campaign available in there on auction, and some just for a donation. So, with all of that, we're going to start off with an introduction from one of the state officials who has done so much over the years to help make Prop 215 actually work. We've been very lucky in California to have a succession of really fine attorneys general who have supported the law. And the latest is some former Assemblyman Rob Bonta, who has a message for us here today, which we will show you now.
Hello, California NORML. It's wonderful to join all of you. I'm Rob Bonta, California Attorney General. Thank you for this invitation to join you virtually for this gathering of advocates fighting for sound cannabis policy. For nearly 50 years, California NORML's activism has been tireless. It's been consistent. It's made a difference. You've helped countless patients receive essential medicine, medicine that eases suffering, medicine that many people need. You've shaped a national discussion on cannabis policy, one that I'm sure will one day lead to safe and regulated legalization at the federal level. Today, we're honoring 25 years of Prop 215 and everyone who took part in that history. Because of your work, each day we continue to make history. California is the world's 5th largest economy. We are number 1 in the nation for many things like starting new businesses. We are number 1 in manufacturing, agriculture, entertainment, tourism, technology, and college graduates. And we are also number 1 in the world for legal cannabis. Our state has the largest legal cannabis market in the world. As California's Attorney General, I think that's a good thing. Whether it's medicinal or recreational adult use, a legal and regulated marketplace ensures the industry is successful, and it ensures product is safe and tested. And specifically, when it comes to medicinal use, our progressive policies recognize that this product is not only popular, it is vital for so many patients. We've come a long way since Prop 215, but we still have a lot of work to do to transition the illicit market into the legal one. Illegal and unlicensed cannabis damages our environment, it hurts our economy, and it's harmful to the health and safety of our community. We need smart regulation, smart law enforcement, streamlined licensing systems, and the removal of other barriers that keep cannabis unsafe and underground. I believe the cannabis market can become fully legitimate and prosperous. I'm optimistic because I've seen the progress that can happen when everyone with a stake in the outcome comes to the table to figure out solutions. In 2015, I sought to create California's first statewide cannabis regulatory system. I had a unique vantage point as an assembly member representing Oakland, a city where the war on drugs had led to violent crackdowns. People of color were left bruised and beaten, thrown behind bars, and torn away from their families and support network, all for cannabis. This devastating history of aggressive enforcement in Oakland forced some tough conversations and policy changes, and the city slowly emerged as the heart and the headquarters for cannabis justice, equity, and entrepreneurship. We knew in 2015 that voters across California were on the verge of fully legalizing adult use of cannabis, and we needed to make the law work. During that time, I served as chair of the Assembly Health Committee, where I learned more about the medicinal importance of cannabis and the need for safe, accessible, high-quality medicine. Efforts to create a regulatory system for cannabis had failed before in the state capitol, but failure was no longer an option. With full legalization looming on the ballot, we knew the industry was about to explode. So we brought in the patients and their advocates, we brought in the criminal justice folks, and the cities and counties, the cultivators and manufacturers, law enforcement, and organized labor. We listened to everyone's ideas and concerns. And even if every proposal didn't make it into the final law, people were heard. They were understood. Alliances were created. Friendships were fostered. Those conversations led to legislation that established the core tenets of the cannabis regulations that are in place today. The regulatory landscape is an ongoing project, but as evidenced by today's conference, we have a broad coalition that's willing to work together to continue to improve. We need partnerships like this more than ever. The illicit market remains a dark cloud hanging over an emerging industry. For example, last month, I announced the results of the Campaign Against Marijuana Planting Program, or CAMP. This year, we eradicated nearly 1.2 million cannabis plants that were grown illegally en masse on our public lands. These grows often exploit labor and use dangerous, outlawed chemicals that harm wildlife, ecosystems, and water supplies. That's also why, in addition to sharing this season's results, last month I also announced the California DOJ will initiate a 6-month review of the CAMP program to ensure we solidify the program's updated focus and to ensure we are using our resources to effectively address the environmental, labor, and economic impacts of illegal cultivation. As we move the cannabis industry into the legal, regulated marketplace, there is no excuse for the environmental devastation, economic impact, and labor exploitation we continue to see in illegal and unlicensed grows. That's why our work continues. When we focus on solutions, when we hear each other and respect the work of each stakeholder, we can overcome the challenges and bring the industry into the light. We must continue to work together for public health so patients can access safe and affordable medicine. We must continue to work together for clean water and a healthy environment. We must continue to work together for small businesses so entrepreneurs and workers can access banks, pay taxes, provide for their families, and compete on equal footing with their competitors. We want safety and security for workers and consumers. And finally, we must continue to work together for social justice and criminal justice reform. Enough people have been arrested in our neighborhoods for cannabis. It's time we bring more investment into our neighborhoods. During this conference, I hope you continue to learn. I hope you strengthen alliances and deepen partnerships as we continue to work to create a better, safer cannabis industry. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. Thank you for the contributions you made with Prop 215 that quite literally changed history and changed lives for the better. Have a wonderful conference.
Well, thank you. It seems that we still have a lot of the same problems today that we had 25 years ago. We are fortunate, especially to be here, though, in San Francisco, because San Francisco itself was the birthplace of the medical marijuana movement here in California and elsewhere. And it was, in fact, 30 years ago today, 30 years, that San Francisco passed the Proposition P, the Medical Marijuana Initiative, which was really set the stage for Prop 215 and everything else that came after. We have been fortunate here in San Francisco to have progressive representatives who really support safe access to medical marijuana and support of the laws. And we've been through a lot of legislators over the time, but we're lucky to have now a sitting state senator from where we are, Scott Wiener, who just last year, in fact, sponsored a bill to expedite free cannabis giveaways for medical patients. Senator Wiener.
Thank you, Dale. And it was music to my ears. I feel validated when you say that San Francisco was the birthplace, because whenever I say that, my great colleague from the East Bay, Senator Nancy Skinner, disputes me, and we get into an argument about whether it was East Bay or San Francisco. But I know we're right; it was San Francisco. So I just first want to say thank you to everyone, because I know there are so many people in the room here, and people who couldn't be here today, people who are no longer with us, who not just made Prop 215 a reality because it was a grassroots, bottom-up campaign. This wasn't something that institutional forces put on the ballot. This was people-powered by people who were trying to save lives of people living with HIV here in San Francisco and elsewhere, people with cancer, and it was just an amazing people-powered movement. And of course, it resulted from many, many years of just trying to just provide medicine to people. And so many people who put themselves at risk for arrest, for prosecution, for imprisonment, and people who actually were arrested, prosecuted, imprisoned, and have their lives turned upside down for trying to make sure that people had access to their medicine. And so I want to just really, from the bottom of my heart, thank the heroes who built this movement and who got Prop 215 passed. And Prop 215, it's extraordinary because yes, it was triggered this sort of national wave that we've seen that is even at times bipartisan in terms of medical cannabis throughout the country. But it also was a step in the incredibly painfully slow process of dismantling the war on drugs and understanding that the drug use is it's a health issue, and it needs to be viewed that way and not as a criminal issue. And we need to stop arresting people and incarcerating people for this flawed notion that that's somehow going to cause people to stop using. And we need to recognize that there are situations like with medical cannabis where we want to make sure people can use. So it was, for so many reasons, Prop 215 really changed the conversation, and it saved lives. It has saved so many lives. And we now need to make sure that we keep that spirit alive of why Prop 215 happened in the first place. And we need to make sure that that as particularly post legalization of adult use, that we don't lose that, right? That we don't see mega corporate takeovers of this industry, that we continue to support the small farmers and manufacturers and people who built this movement in this community in California. We don't want to see their work then get co-opted by big multinational corporations. That's not what we need. And so, but we need to make some changes to make sure that we are supporting our local small businesses and continuing to have that access. We took one step a couple of years ago with SB 34, which I just reminded myself, I went and looked at this law, our compassionate care law that was signed into law, we put it right there in statute. It's the Dennis Peron and Brownie Mary Act. And we did that very intentionally to really recognize these heroes. But we did legalize adult use and then unintentionally put these big taxes on compassion programs that have no revenue, and they were all disappearing, and that was denying access in terms of people who need their medicine. and can't afford to be paying these taxes. And so we were able to get rid of those taxes on compassion programs. And that's just one small thing that we needed to do. But we need to, and this is not something that as a liberal Democrat from San Francisco would normally say, the taxes on cannabis and some of the regulations are so significant that it fuels the illicit market and it harms the legal operators. And so we need to take a hard look at that, at those taxes and some of the regulations. Of course, I'm a supporter of taxing cannabis and of health and safety regulations and so forth, but we need to be thoughtful about it as well and make sure that we're striking the right balance. We also need to recognize that we in the 2016 ballot measure we had the local decision making by cities. And we, I think, assume that some cities would allow businesses, other cities wouldn't. And if it wasn't allowed in your cities, you could drive to the next city over or two cities over and get what you need. Well, it's a large majority of California cities, significant majority, don't allow anything. And so we have huge swaths of California where you cannot access legal cannabis. And again, that fuels the illicit market. It harms our small businesses, and it denies access. And it's not what was intended. And so we need to look at that to make sure that that we have, yes, local decision making on some of these issues, but within some boundaries. And having huge swaths of the state that don't allow, it's just not tenable. And again, it fuels the illicit market. So there's so much progress. And I'm so proud of what California and particularly San Francisco has been able to do. But there's a lot more work ahead to make sure that we're truly fulfilling the dreams and the promise of Prop 215 and the movement behind it. So thank you so much, everyone, for your continued work. You will always have my support and partnership, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So now we're going to dive into the story of Prop 215 and how it came to be, and that's going to be what we're going to talk about this morning. We have a lot to say, a lot of ground to cover, but hopefully we can get everybody in here. But let me start by going back to how things were 30 years in 1991. It was still the high point of the drug war, basically. You asked Americans, what's the number one problem? They would say it's illegal drugs. And that included marijuana. And you could not say anything about admit to the use of marijuana and expect to hold on to any respectable job or public position or anything else. People were having their cars and their yachts taken, their homes taken for growing marijuana. There were efforts afoot to recriminalize or to, so it was pretty bleak times. But there was this murmuring about medical cannabis that in the background, which so there were stories about people who found that cannabis helped them with nausea from cancer chemotherapy and glaucoma in particular. And there were other things that had been, in fact, documented in a long history of cannabis medicine that actually goes back for centuries. And it was really brought to public light here by one of our dear departed friends, Dr. Todd Mirkarimi, who researched this and discovered this extensive history of 19th century and early 20th century use of cannabis as medicine. Unfortunately, in 1970, the Controlled Substances Act came down, and cannabis or marijuana was scheduled as a Schedule I drug with no medical purpose. That was actually done on the temporary understanding that there would be a report back from the Presidential Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse, and then they would reschedule it appropriately. The commission came back and sort of said that marijuana should be decriminalized, but the Congress never changed the Schedule I status. Our organization, NORML, sued the federal government to make marijuana available for medical use. And this was, I think, in 1972. That lawsuit went on for some 18 years or so before finally being, getting a very favorable decision from an administrative law judge, Francis Young, who ruled, yes, marijuana clearly has medical uses, very safe, it ought to be available. He was arbitrarily overruled by his agency, the DEA, which has kept it illegal ever since, with the exception, the curious exception of a handful of patients who were allowed in to a supposed compassionate use access program. There were a result of a federal lawsuit started by one Robert Randall, a glaucoma patient, who did manage to become a legal medical patient. We'll have another legal medical patient with us later today. Basically, medical marijuana had been at standstill. But then something else happened. There was an AIDS epidemic here in San Francisco. And people in the AIDS and HIV community soon discovered that marijuana was very helpful with their appetite loss and pain issues in dealing with AIDS. And we had, fortunately, a very active AIDS community here in San Francisco that was politicized around this. And we happen to have a very powerful ally in Dennis Peron, a longtime marijuana and gay rights activist in the city who really took an interest in this when his house was raided by the San Francisco Narcotics Department, and 3 ounces of pot were found in there. And Dennis had a long-standing dear friend and lover, Jonathan West, who had AIDS at the time. And it occurred to Dennis, why are they taking this pot from this house when Jonathan West needs it for his AIDS? And from that was born the notion of having a San Francisco medical marijuana initiative. So unfortunately, we do not have Dennis with us any longer, but we do have a recorded interview of Dennis where he tells the story of how this started. So if we can hear that, please.
I'd like to introduce Dennis Peron to the television audience. Dennis Peron, about the size of Napoleon, is responsible for the Compassionate Use Initiative. He is the man who has brought to San Francisco medical marijuana, runs the Cannabis Buyers Club. This man today, this gray-haired man, Vietnam vet, right?
Yes.
Is making history. Tell us about this Compassionate Use Initiative, Dennis.
Well, I'd say this all came about because of the AIDS epidemic, what is happening here, not only in San Francisco, but around the nation. And the cancer epidemic, where so many people are suffering, all the drugs they're taking aren't working. Marijuana has been shown to be an effective drug for thousands and thousands of years. And in a way, we're kind of rediscovering marijuana in light of current and modern day dilemmas, medical dilemmas. If you have HIV or cancer, you feel very nauseous very often. Your appetite is diminished, and you feel just awful. Marijuana is one drug that stimulates the appetite, eases nausea, and the side effect is that you feel a little better. And I found that out when my lover, Jonathan West, got AIDS. Jonathan, like all AIDS patients, was prescribed a myriad of drugs, and all those drugs had severe side effects, from nausea to sleeplessness to irritability to loss of appetite. Marijuana was the one drug that helped him not only increase his appetite, ease his nausea, but it was one of the drugs that made him feel a little better. And if you've ever lost a loved one to AIDS or cancer, you would know just to see them feel a little better, even if it's just for an hour, there's nothing you would do. Nothing you wouldn't do to do that for them. When Jonathan died, I dedicated my life to all the suffering Jonathans of this world, to legalize marijuana as a medicine, because I know that this is being denied people for purely political reasons. That this is a drug like many other drugs that have good effects and bad effects. I believe the good effects outweigh the bad effects. This is one drug being denied people for purely political reasons. Purely to demonize further and continue further this idiotic drug war. Well, I know that marijuana will be legal someday, but my friends who have AIDS and cancer do not have time to wait till America wakes up and legalizes marijuana. So that is where the compassionate use came about, that we were going to start a club for AIDS patients and cancer patients in the memory of Jonathan West, who died of AIDS. In his memory, we would supply marijuana to people with multiple sclerosis, cancer, and AIDS. And then I find out that marijuana helps for arthritis and rheumatism, which has allowed a lot of senior citizens to join the club. And now the club is taking its message statewide towards the form of an initiative. We're going to collect 500,000 signatures, commencing in November '95 and continuing for 150 days to collect 500,000 signatures to qualify an initiative for the ballot that will legalize marijuana as medicine cultivation upon a doctor's recommendation. That's it in a nutshell.
Dennis, you mentioned in your process that marijuana has good effects and bad effects. What are the bad effects?
Well, the bad effects are short-term memory loss, which, it's very serious, and it can be serious. Short-term memory, you forget what you're doing. A cotton mouth. If you don't drink water, you could get dehydrated. And certain people experience panic attacks. And so those things we know happen. But we understand that. But in fact, the side effects of AZT is in fact death. If you take AZT long enough, you will die. Now that's a pretty severe side effect if you ask me. And in fact, many of the drugs that cancer patients take are designed to kill you in a very slow manner. And these drugs, chemotherapy, are designed to kill, almost kill every white cell in your body and hopefully kill the cancer. But many times they kill the patient, in addition to killing the cancer. Marijuana has never killed anybody. Marijuana is one drug that can be used with other drugs safely. That we've had many cancer patients on the cancer ward being infused with chemotherapy, take 1 or 2 puffs, and their stomach nausea is subsided. They feel a little better. And so we're not talking about massive amounts of marijuana. In many cases, we're talking about 5 or 6 puffs. Now, the government is using these people as pawns, and we don't like it, and that's why we're doing it.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the success in the world.
It will win. It will win.
Win, yes. And so we did. There it is in a nutshell how the campaign got started. This was taken after Dennis had organized the Prop P initiative in San Francisco in 1991, which was the first initiative anywhere that just declared the city of San Francisco in favor of medical use of marijuana. We were hoping that we would get, over 60% of the vote, like all the other feel-good propositions on the ballot. But we got 80% of the vote. And then we knew we were on to something. As Dennis said, 60% of San Franciscans could be crazy, but 80% of San Franciscans aren't crazy. So the campaign went on to Santa Cruz, to the Southland, other places which we will be talking about. But the other thing that happened was that Dennis felt emboldened to open the first publicly operating cannabis buyers club in San Francisco at 194 Church Street, upper floor, where he rented out a lounge, basically, where he's made marijuana available. It would sell it to people who came in with a doctor's recommendation showing that they were sick, a doctor's note. And lo and behold, the city was willing to accept this. In fact, I was at sort of the opening of the club, and Senator Milton Marks was present. And we realized very early on that this was going to be popular with city fathers, given the and mothers, given the tremendous vote that we had. The club got so popular that it outgrew its original quarters when it had like 4,000 people, and Dennis moved it to a big 5-story building on Market Street, 1444 Market, which had multiple floors to serve patients, and where he also moved the campaign headquarters, much to the discomfort of some of us, but it worked out fine in the end. Before we go on to recognize 4 people who were with the San Francisco Cannabis Buyers Club or with Dennis, if you come up, we have Dennis's brothers here, Jeff and Brian, and we have Wayne Justmann. Wayne, come up here, sir. Wayne Justmann, you'll see him in a lot of pictures of did security at the Cannabis Buyers Club, and I would like to present him with this award as a pioneer of Prop 215. If you'd like to put in a word or two.
Thank you. I look around and see what great energy and great people that there are in the world that are here. To Dale and to NORML, thank you for putting all of this together. For those of you that remember 25 years ago, and I was talking with Dale, I remember doing a 10-year anniversary on the top of the gay, lesbian, bisexual building in San Francisco. On its 10-year anniversary, we really thought we were doing something. Here we are, 15 more years at 25 years. I personally feel so very blessed as a person with AIDS for 35 years to have worked with these individuals, to be associated with Dennis, Brownie Mary, Todd, the wonderful folks that are here, Anna. You were so important to all of us. And Ross and Tom, who are going to speak for us, and all the folks here. I just want to tell you how very proud I am to be associated with what you're all doing today. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. Is Lynne Barnes? Where's Lynne? Lynne Barnes. Gio, she was here. Yes. Gio was in the office. And she was the one, she was a nurse, and she was also did intake for the club. So she probably saw more of the guts of medical marijuana than anybody else in the movement at the time. Gio, here, you too. Yes. Recognized pioneer. You and John were always in the office.
What a pleasure to be here today. You should all feel proud and awed by what you've done with your energy. I was a foot soldier called by Dennis to come from shutting doors in hospital rooms and letting people smoke pot to being out there in the public as an activist, and that was hard for an introvert. While I was taking care of patients in the hospital, I took care of a very special one, and tomorrow is a very special day because it's the 25th anniversary of his death. And he said, there's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. That was Mario Savio. And Dennis and Mario Savio are spirit brothers. And I just want to read a short poem to my dear Dennis, who is in the same category as John Lewis, Mario Savio, etc. Dear Den, 25 years on, 43 years on for you and me, I feel your persona in this room right now. Empathetic in that way you were when you sat around with me and my commune pals at your island restaurant and listened to us, drew us out, gently dismantling our commune's heterocentric world until we saw our blindness changed. You were tender, brave, persuasive, way back then in the 70s and going forward decades. You only got better at pointing out societal flaws, speaking and acting for humanitarian change. You emerged from stacking body bags in Vietnam to reform the law for greater good with your defiant 5-story medical marijuana club. You healed from war, giving outcasts a caring place to belong. You touched so many, Den. President Carter's troubled nephew and countless other ill, ignored, maltreated souls, all adding up to a life's quilt of activist compassion. Here today, you are nurturing communion among those of us in this room, even from the grave, my friend. May you rest in your benevolent power, dear Den. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Gio. And we also have two brothers of Dennis here, Jeff and Brian. Jeff, they weren't here for the initiative, but they represent the family blood. So tell us about it. What's it like to be?
Many years ago, my brother started a movement that's continuing to this day. But now it's up to all of you to make the laws fair and reasonable. We all think that we have legalization now, but we don't, okay? The senator spoke about the laws and how they're unfair. They are unfair. I can tell you firsthand, okay? And how we're gonna get better is you guys, okay? My brother relied on you many years ago, so you have to carry the fight on now.
I just got to say about Brian, he's the one who looks and sounds like Dennis the most. And he has a ballad that he is going to perform for us.
I wrote this song for Dennis's memorial, and I tried to get as many of Dennis's sound bites as I could into the song. So I wrote this song, and it has all of Dennis's sound bites. One of Dennis's sound bites was that all use is medical. That if you are smoking marijuana and you're totally healthy, there's a psychological component to marijuana that helps our brains. It's a medicine for our mind, body, soul, and spirit. So recreational is pretty much the government's way of saying trivializing our pain. That's what Dennis's words were. So let me do this song, I guess. Let's put this microphone up here. I guess it's okay. He was my brother and a friend always. We stuck together in those early days. He always had such good. Whoops, I'm almost losing it here. We talked What's this thing here? And here's to you, my blood cell bro. You help so many folks I know. You always were that pot selling boy, and all that medicine brought healing joy. The AIDS crisis, San Francisco Bay. Dennis said that he found a way for folks wasting with no appetite just smoking a joint, and they wanna bite. Leave him alone, the cops were told. They need safe access where pot is sold. A place to hang and feel at home, to share a joint and not be alone. All use is medicine, all of this he said. If not for your body, then for your head. The list is long of all the ills. It helps and soothes, not taking pills. Of you we all are oh so proud. We'll smoke a joint and say it loud, that all pot use is medical. We want it off, Nixon schedule. He left us here to carry on. Our pot selling hero is dead and gone. If when we die, we go somewhere, I'll bet you $1 he's smoking there. And here's to you, my pot selling bro. You help so many folks I know. You always were that pot selling boy, and all that medicine for healing joy.
Okay, and so, but San Francisco was not the only place that where medical marijuana became a political issue. In fact, there was interest in other parts of the state as well, and one of them was our next guest here today, Anna Boyce, who's from Orange County, and she was a delegate with the California Senior Legislature 25 years ago. I guess you've retired from the senior legislature now, Anna? She was there for 16 years, and she was a proponent, along with Dennis, of Proposition 215. There were two proponents. Anna Boyce, a registered nurse from the South, will tell her story now.
What do we say about loose wires?
Yeah, well, you can use the
Good morning. I'm here to tell you why I was asked to tell you why I became involved in marijuana medicinally use. I started in 1991, 92, 93, 94, a bill. You have to remember, we in Orange County haven't been as active as you people up in San Francisco. We were a bit late we're still a bit late, unfortunately. So it was quite a trauma when I brought it up at the California Senior Legislature that I wanted to put in use of marijuana legally. And fortunately, they supported it. It went through the process and it landed on Governor Wilson's desk. And he said, unfortunately, Anna, it would involve losing federal funding if I approve this. So that year I had written it as prescribed. I changed the word to recommend. It went through all of the committees again, landed on Wilson's desk, and again he said sorry. So that led to me deciding we will do a proposition, simply because propositions did not require the governor to sign it. That's the legal. You people vote, it passes, it's automatically a bill. So automatically legal. That's the beginning of Proposition 215. In the interim, I met Dennis and I met a number of other individuals that were very, very supportive. In fact, on many occasions, traveled, took me to different meetings where we could possibly get some support. So I want you to know I'm happy that we have Prop 215, needs a lot more support because it has not influenced the governor that they have to make this federally illegal. We have attorneys that are working on it, because if we don't change it from just the separate states deciding that they will make it a compassionate use act, we will win it being non-federally covered. So thank you for for supporting this. It is my honor actually to be here, and I've known not only Dennis, but a number of others. Lonnie from down in Riverside, Victor, and a number of others that are here now. I thank you for supporting us, and please, let's work much harder and get it federally approved.
Well, thank you, and we'll turn now to another hotbed for the medical cannabis movement was Santa Cruz, which actually went to the polls on this just the year after San Francisco did. We have here Valerie Corral, the founder of the Women's Alliance for Medical Marijuana, whose many troubles with the law have helped push this along. Valerie?
Thank you, Dale.
She's keeping time.
I got 7 minutes. Okay, and I'm long-winded. I first want to thank you, Dale and Ellen, for driving this and carrying California NORML with such heroic and really, really profound energy and money. And Dennis, well, look around the room and just know that his power and the genius of his messaging was so incredible. It was so clear and so remarkable. And because he was such a firebrand, an incredible orator, he got people on fire. And then he took that wild edge so that everybody else could look semi-conservative. It was really kind of, really great. It was like, oh yeah, Dennis. And John Entwistle and Dr. Todd, as I look around this room, I know that I really wouldn't even be standing here without so many of you, without the support and the love and the encouragement and really the hard work. And any one of you could be standing here in my place, because we did this together, and opportunities gave us they provided the effort for us to do this work. I mean, you get a chance and then you take that chance and it doesn't arise again. So if you don't do it, if you don't seize that moment and go for it, you may just never have that. May never have it again. So I've been asked to do a little summation of what happened in Santa Cruz. So on the heels of Proposition P in 1991, the next year we had started, there was a proposition or Measure A in Santa Cruz. And that I had been using cannabis since '74 for seizure disorder that I suffered from a TBI. And I'm going to move these wires before I trip over them and have another TBI. Had got busted. Now, it was perfect. Actually, it was serendipity. It was perfect timing because it allowed us to step forward and to, I came to a NORML event, and really you guys talked, Dennis, and you guys talked me into challenging the law on medical necessity. And because I thought, well, I can at least get pot in jail, so I'll be okay. And using it as a medicine for having already for 18 years. We had given it to many people. We had, by the time we got arrested, and that's my then husband, Mike Corral, who could be standing here as well, because he was very elemental part in bringing forth this movement and our role in it. We joined forces with, after Measure A passed with 78% of the vote, 75% of the vote, in Santa Cruz County, in Santa Cruz City, we brought forth our own representation. Dennis wanted us to start a cannabis buyers club, and we weren't so keen on the cannabis buyers club. We wanted to do something a little bit different, more of a collective style. And Scott Imler, Fred Psyche, and Basil Gabriel were elemental, along with Theodora Carey, who did fundraising, were elemental in bringing forth the Santa Cruz. It actually wasn't the Santa Cruz Cannabis Buyers Club. It had a cooperative. I think it had a different name at first, but we saw a little bit different pathways forward. So there was a way for us to do this separately, and there was a Cannabis Buyers Club, and WHAM opened as a collective of patients and caregivers serving the most seriously ill people and people who were financially compromised, so people could have it on a donation basis. And that's how that really grew into being quite something. There's no such thing as the first collective, because the first collective is, we're tribal, so we're always forming private collectives and always coming together in unison and unity to bring forth a message. I wanted to, I just have a few more minutes, but I wanted to talk about the intersection of roles and the way that so many people have brought this forward, and there's so many different stories. And I was reading some of the history, and history is such a movable feast. You're telling this story, but what does it mean, and who's right? And there are like almost 8 billion people, and I never met anybody who didn't think they were right. So I just want to say that there's a lot of room for that. And as you tell the stories and as you share your stories, bring in the part that touches us as human beings. The one thing that has not really happened, and heard Scott Wiener, Senator, talk about compassionate access, but the equity of people who have been serving their friends, growing illegally, serving their friends, helping one another, gifting. There's very little equity for an allowance for those people to be able to step into a really expensive, highly regulated market. Now, I'm not arguing about regulation because we want to do the best we can do. Does everybody do that? Well, sometimes maybe it's the best we can do, but it isn't the best there is. And regulation is great. Making an avenue for those who have served others to be able to enter this market and to really drive out the Jeff Bezoses of the world. Jeff doesn't love cannabis. He could care less about his employees and not testing them. He wants to grow it, deliver it to your door. If we support goodness, that goodness should come not only from our own hearts and how we serve one another, but how we take care of those in the greatest need, make sure that they have equal access to the best quality products, that we take care of one another, of our staff, of the people we work with, of each other as activists and the earth shakers and the planet that we live on. And that everything we do comes from our connection with nature, because it's really the gift of this planet and the plant that has opened our access and thank you very much, our access to something so great. And as we open those doors and we open them to other medicines, other plant medicines, and recognize that they too are part of a bigger picture. Thank you. I'm going to get the hook and get drawn up. But thank you so much. Much love.
Okay, for our next two speakers, we turn back to San Francisco, where Dennis's activities really created quite a stir and needed support and got support from city officials. Our first guest here from the city was Ross Mirkarimi, former sheriff and city supervisor of San Francisco, who at the time of Prop 215, I believe, was working for Terrence Hallinan, hey, applause for Terrence Hallinan, the greatest DA San Francisco ever had, and the only DA in the state who endorsed Proposition 215. Okay, Ross, tell us what you did. Yeah.
Good morning. First, I want to thank Dale and Ellen and NORML for hosting this wonderful event. Reunions are always fun. And if Terrence Hallinan was alive and he passed away in January 2020, I know he would just really revel and regale in this opportunity. He would also, I think, respond similarly to something that I read last night, and I can just imagine what Terrence would say. To kind of put it in context, I think how far the movement has catapulted since the advent of 215 25 years ago. I read on the NORML.org website that Gallup poll, who does a trend line poll every single year to gauge the popularity of legalization of cannabis, that 68% of Americans support full legalization of cannabis, marijuana. And 78% of that field are Democrats. So 78% of that field of people who say we should just legalize marijuana. And Hallinan, Terrence, would say to me, Ross, why the hell did the Democrats just not go for legalization in Congress? Why don't they do it? Why don't they take it all the way? And I couldn't agree with him more, especially in light of this last Tuesday's election results, where now the Democrats are in a defensive posture over the next 2 to 4 years, not taking the kind of bold steps necessary, not the type of bold steps that I think that was certainly generated here in California and elsewhere. And Prop 215 was the crescendo of the first movement. As it was said earlier, Proposition P in 1991 was kind of the generating seed, but some might forget that when Harvey Milk ran against Terrence Hallinan for supervisor in 1977 and they squared off, Dennis Peron was in the mix then. And then wonderfully, when Harvey was elected and Dennis was still in the mix there, because as a Vietnam vet and somebody who early on believed in the need for being able to equitably give cannabis, make sure that there was access to cannabis, both Supervisor Milk and Mayor Moscone started something that was a little known version of Proposition P, that was Measure W. A great amount of tension had started to percolate with the police department. And people like Dennis and the smattering of many others who were taking cannabis future into their own hands were getting really harassed. And when I joined Terrence's office in '94, this became an issue near and dear to me. When I was a child, my mother made me wear a NORML button in its infancy. I had no idea what I was doing.
That explains everything.
I had no idea. I all get to blame her parents, not my father. So then that sort of came full circle, and I was happily on point for Terrence in meeting such amazing people who made it possible to elect Terrence Hallinan district attorney in San Francisco. And I took time off as his legislative point to run. The community was able to transcend from being just the cannabis community in knowing how to elect its allies, and how that partnership was cultivated in such a way that we knew it would be a tour de force, that it wouldn't really ever, I think, reverse itself. And Terrence had a very spirited re-election campaign in 1999, and I was quoted in the Chronicles saying that if it wasn't for the medical cannabis community, he would have not been reelected in 1999. And I know that for a fact when I can see so many of the people here in East Bay and Bay Area, people like Jeff Jones and everybody who just completely marshaled unbelievable amounts of resources. I've never seen so much cash. In that, so unbelievable amounts of resources, and we were able to legally apply it towards, the campaign and motivate a grassroots that on a municipal level, this was a whole new strategy. It hadn't happened yet. And it really cemented the idea for us that politically speaking, there's no going forward if you're a progressive, but if you're somebody who wants to win and not really give strong nod, partnership, and sort of that professional collegiality to the cannabis movement. And Terrence did that. And he was a fighter. And it was good to be on his side and the side of this community. And it's amazing to me, how far we've come in 25 years, but how far we still need to go. And my role when I became a supervisor was that because of really a great deal of you in the room preceding me, I'll just end on this, that I was the person with Tom on the board, and it was such a joy to be on the board with Tom and then working for Terrence, and they overlapped and worked together as supervisors, to author the regulatory framework for San Francisco. And I'll just, closing on this note, that for cannabis, and that became a template for many other counties around California, but other countries were listening. So I was invited by the State Department to go to Uruguay, and I spoke to members of the parliament in Uruguay about our legislation in San Francisco. And I couldn't believe that Uruguay then became a few years later like the child who actually helped birth the global recreational movement. So it's an honor to be with you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you, Uruguay. And for our next speaker, a co-conspirator on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and later assemblyman from California, who sponsored the first full-scale legalization bill that actually got through the Public Safety Committee. Tom Ammiano.
Thank you so much. So many memories. Obvious this morning, we realize that we're all standing on the shoulders of many people. Dennis Peron, of course, Brownie Mary, because women had a big part in the legalization and the demystification of marijuana. When Ross was talking about our bill, I remember, so we had this hearing in the ornate chambers, and everybody was there. And the press, of course, never being sympathetic, I got a call, and they said, well, we heard during your hearing somebody smoked a joint in the chambers. And I said, give me a break. There's smoke detectors. The sheriffs are there. So the guy said, well, didn't you smell it? I said, I don't know what it smells like. So, and the connection, and thank you for that, with Harvey and Dennis, very important. They did have a bromance, absolutely. And in fact, when I first met Dennis, he was at the Island, a restaurant there that he started, and Harvey was a patron. Well, so one thing that I always admired about both of them is they connected the fucking dots. And today we say intersectionality. I mean, they saw it, the health, the criminal justice, all the housing, land use, all the attendant issues. Because, systematically, marijuana, has that reefer madness association. At the Board of Supervisors, we did what we could. We had a lot of sympathy. Dennis's genius was manifested. I had no idea what was going to await me in Sacramento. The mayors were playing at both sides. Feinstein was totally against it. And God knows she could use some edibles today. Jesus Christ. Willie Brown looked at the money part of it, and Gavin Newsom, went back. I'm against marijuana. I'm for marijuana. Fine. So Sacramento, a different animal, much different animal. I brought activism to my elected career, and that's been, I think, a plus for me because it helps you get across social justice ideas. You have a platform. Sacramento, they wouldn't. The speaker said to me when I introduced the bill, "I don't want you to introduce the bill because you won't even get a second out of committee." Well, I learned the blood sport of politics here in San Francisco, and so I was able to get it heard in committee, even one time out of committee. What I found out, the undermining of the bills happened from the obvious, the police, et cetera, and so forth. But it also happened, and I was so glad to hear the speaker from Santa Cruz. One of the reasons my bills got undermined was from another element in the marijuana community, which was out for the money only. Patient rights weren't that important. And so they hired lobbyists, and they said, Ammiano is not the guy. He's too lefty, he's too queer, he's whatever he is. But we need to have it as, more of an establishment approach, meaning only for money. It was a bridge issue up there sometimes. There's a guy from Modoc County, a very conservative Republican, but there were issues with marijuana in his county. And I said, why don't I come up to Modoc County? And he goes, well, I don't know. There's a lot of rednecks up here. I said, yeah, but they make the best husbands. So, so the irony was you could win somebody like that over, but not some of what we now call dinos, Democrats in names only. So it's very, very, very complicated. But, I was proud with the community support to be able to present this, have it go down, but to start the conversation. And that meant a lot. And Rob Bonta was a colleague of mine. That was his first year there. He was always very supportive. And, to see him now as AG and to listen to his reasoning and his analysis is such a wonderful thing. After all the, what could I say, opposition to it, they even once when we had a committee meeting on the marijuana, the opposition organized Black ministers to come to the hearing and picket it. I mean, so the idea went deep, but I always say the problem with Sacramento and places like that is it's all about legislation, but we're really a movement, and we're part of a movement that's focused on marijuana, but we're also interconnected with other movements, the queer movement, the immigration movement, the healthcare movement. Someday we're going to have single payer, I promise you. And then maybe this access and equity issue will finally be resolved. I can only hope so. And remember, as I said in Sacramento, when they go low, we get high. Thank you.
We're going to run, this is a marathon session, and we're going to run right into panel number 2. I want to just ask the people who are here, what most surprises you or strikes you about where we are now, 25 years after Proposition 215 passed? Yes, quick, just a quick soundbite.
I was up. My mother recently passed away, and I was up in the Lake Tahoe area where she has lives in a very small town. Many Republicans, and many of them came to me to talk about. She's not a marijuana. You want me to? Okay, I thought I was loud enough. My mother recently passed away, and she lives in a place called Gray Eagle, where there are many Republicans, and she has her sign out in front, in our America, Black Lives Matter, all lives are equal. But she's one of two people. She became Nona Marijuana, one of her personas, in her 90s, and she had many different talents. But many people there came up to me and said that she had opened their eyes. And I think what surprises me is that the message that we carry is often carried by others, so that it's profoundly important that we speak, and profoundly important the way that we touch people's lives, that recognizing that information is always available, that we always have the opportunity to share it and change people's minds. And if we can't, maybe our mothers can. But so.
Any other thoughts? Yes.
I'll just real quickly, I'll say that I like to read the current trends, and I think it's amazing that in 2020 to 2021, that millennials under 30 spent $4.4 billion on marijuana and cannabis in the United States, $4.4 billion, and they absolutely have no clue about Prop 215.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? I could say myself, the thing that astounds me most is that 25 years after the passage of Prop 215, medical marijuana is still not legal under federal law. I never thought that would happen. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next panel.
Do you want to hear from them?
Yeah, do you want to hear? Did you have something to say, Tom?
No, just thanks for being here and sustaining. And what we want will happen. Hopefully, when most of us are still alive, that would be great. And as a senior, I want to tell you, I'm going to be 80 this year. And if it weren't for my edibles and blueberries and tinctures, I probably wouldn't even have made it this morning, truthfully. I need a bathroom, right, Clinton?
Do you have anything to add?
I want to repeat that we must get active on getting the federal government to rechange the status and make it legal to be able to use it. I still have people frightened that could be using the marijuana because they have cancer, or the other one is the arthritis. It's a blessing, actually, for the people like that can't move, can't do anything. Take a dose, take 1 or 2 puffs, and it's a new life for them. So we must work much harder, or I hate to use the word bribe, but treat the people that have the force to change it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Legally, we are tied. Our hands are tied. So we need to get it changed. And if nothing else, find out what group is doing it and join them. And let's help them change it.
Thank you. Next panel, please.